David, thanks very much for joining us again.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to winter in Melbourne. We were just saying before starting to record that second time round, it's still cold in Melbourne.
It is still cold. I'm dressed appropriately this time, which is good.
You're looking very
sunny today.
You're looking very slick. You've out-slicked me. Just in terms of Decidr, I think it's fair to say a lot has changed since the last time. So for those that haven't listened to the first episode, maybe just in a couple of minutes, what the hell does Decidr do?
Yeah. It was more than a year ago when we spoke last time, and the world has changed. The entire world has changed.
There's no Claude.
There's no Claude. There's no OpenClaw, right? People weren't token maxing, all those things. So all those things are part of our lives now. What's changed with Decidr? So we've really grown up as a business since we spoke kind of a year and a half ago. Really starting to see the early results of the compounding activities that we've been doing by our partnership strategy. We have our beta program live now, which wasn't back then, and really starting to kind of level in to our strategy, which is really good. We had a good result in this last quarter.
Yep. And so what does Decidr actually do? So we hear about OpenAI, Claude, Perplexity, all the rest of it. Is it one of those, or how does it interlink?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of new language out in the world, right? Yep. And everyone's trying to figure out how to metabolize all this information and, the financial outcomes of it. But really simply put is Decidr, we're an AI infrastructure company. And what we do is we orchestrate this new intelligence. So we sit on top of the OpenAIs, the Claudes or Anthropics, the open source models, and we actually help those models and put them into workflows for businesses. So probably simply put, what we do is we help put AI into business workflows for companies.
Yeah, because I feel like in terms of even just myself using it, you're only as good as everyone says. You're only as good as the prompt. But at the same time, when you're talking about agentic and agents, if you don't know what you're meant to be doing, it's completely pointless.
Yeah, the world at the moment, they're into prompting, right? And it's on-demand prompting. So when you go into Claude, it's you, the human, putting prompting in, right? So that will eventually move away into what's called agentic activity, which means always-on AI activities that are happening. And when you start to think about a prompts are actually quite sophisticated. They're hard to do, right? You see it on TikTok or on Instagram or wherever you're reading. There's always like this way to prompt or that way to prompt.
You're a 10-year veteran of marketing.
Yes, that type of stuff. But that's really not the, our take is that's not really the way that you use AI. That's a very human way. It's like training an employee. What Decidr does is we break things down right to the workflow level, right? And at a workflow, there's tasks. And what we do is we govern all of those tasks in a workflow. And when you actually go from task to task, actually what we would call the prompt becomes very simple. So for example, get a first name, right? That's in a workflow for a CRM input. And what we do is we build that workflow for everybody, and then essentially decide where AI goes in each one of those task steps. And sometimes AI goes into there, sometimes humans go in there. Sometimes it's just a calculation, right? Sum this, pipeline value. That would be a calculation. And so, I think the world is going to move from prompting to tasks very soon. And that actually narrows what we're asking AI to do.
And in terms of, if we look at it as sort of three key pillars, is it sort of orchestration, discovery, and sort of knowledge, or?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on who you're talking to. I think if you use the common three areas, you have prompt engineering. So that's what we just talked about. And then you have context engineering. So that's like what the context of your business. So what do you do in your sector? How do you do the things that you do? And then there's another level called harness engineering. And that's actually governing it together. So Decidr sits into that harness engineering area and also into the context engineering. But we call it orchestration or coordination. So you could use those words interchangeably: harness engineering, orchestration, or AI coordination.
And this might be a bit of a blatant question, but the space has moved that fast. We talked about 18 months ago doing the podcast. Paul, the founder and co-CEO, Paul Chan, has been at this for a while. What's changed? Have you had to change with the market in terms of whether it's a go-to-market, whether it's like the orchestration layer, then obviously SugarWorks we'll talk to in terms of understanding what a business actually does and what it needs to do and the rest of it. How have you adapted and how quickly have you adapted? Because I think that's part of the parcel, right? That you need to move with the market and need to move with technology.
Yeah.
How do you look at that?
Yeah, sure. To quote a great Canadian, Wayne Gretzky, you want to skate where the puck is going. And definitely Paul's been doing that, and I've been along the ride with him.
Just trying to hold on.
He is the Wayne Gretzky of innovations, that's for sure. But our strategy actually hasn't changed since the very beginning. We've always held the thesis that AI is just a tool, right? It's not a dazzling intelligence. It's just another way to do a task. So that hasn't changed, but what has changed is the way that we talk about it. If I kind of rewind back 2 years, the world was just starting to talk about agents, and so we felt that was a good way to kind of communicate or encapsulate how people thought about AI. Right? We embodied it in a human form. That's then moved to agentic activities, so always on activities, which has been kind of the talk track over the last probably 8 months or so. And now with the OpenClaw explosion and Claude Code, and people really understanding like, okay, well, I can
Practical
create anything,
nature,
right? But is it valuable? And it's a bit dangerous. Like, just because you can doesn't mean that you should do things. And it's being connected into real private systems like Gmail and like internal systems and stuff like that. And so people are starting to realize like, oh, I need to govern this thing, or why should I? And with the rising costs of tokens. In some cases, people are thinking, well, I could probably do this cheaper with a human, right? As opposed to, vibe coding my way and not having any control over it. So we're now entering into this, what we'll call the sovereign era, right, of AI. And sovereign is a big catch-all word, but it means governance, it means accountability, it means visibility, it means the ability to say, okay, well, the AI did this task. What did it think? How did it do it? And if I asked it to do it again, we'll do it in exactly the same way.
And that was going to be one of my questions. In terms of, I know I use Claude way too much for all sorts of different things, from work to a blister if it's healing or not. But does your technology or the modeling and whatnot actually help? We talk about prompts, but coming up with the right answer or coming up with the right workflow so that it doesn't go down. Because I can imagine if you've got 10 tasks, if it stuffs up the second one, what's going to be like at the 10th?
Yes. And that's exactly the problem that I think most people are running into today with OpenClaw or Claude. As you stack what we would call probability agents together, so call them super guessers, right? You start to compound errors, right? Which as you go from task to task. And so that's the unique proposition of Decidr, because we start with the workflow and we design it up front. And when we decide to use AI, we're just using it for a single task, and that task is quite simple. We know that we know the result's going to be accurate every single time coming back. And so by putting things in a particular order in a particular sequence, you don't have runaway probability essentially, and you get the benefits. It combats the two big problems with AI today, which is accuracy and also cost. And so really, with any new technology, the first invention is always really dazzling. People have tried to figure it out, right? I remember, 25 years ago, people would talk about interneting, which I think is funny today, or email. That's not going to replace regular mail or calls or things like that. But there's always a coordination layer that starts to emerge after that new invention, right? The internet doesn't work without those routers in our home, right? We all get them from Telstra and Optus. It takes us 20 minutes to figure them out, but once they're connected, they kind of sit in your cupboard and you never think about them again. But they're the coordination layer. They bring the internet to your home or to the business, right? The right websites at the right time, so on and so forth. And even like the banking system, right? We're able to make payments internationally, but that's because of the SWIFT system, right? And that's boring, but it's incredibly important for the scaling of how to actually use the technology. So we think that orchestration is that next kind of coordination layer that's coming out of there.
It's almost like AI growing up.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? I mean, by historical standards, like AI is moving like logarithmically quick, right? And if you think about, if we even just rewind to February, or January, OpenClaw didn't exist. Just
coming out.
Yeah, and there's more agents on this planet than
and
there are humans.
There's another release. My X feed is just out of control every every day there's some Anthropic's release something that's going to kill another industry.
Yep.
In terms of from a practical nature, we talked about beta customers. I've seen some sort of case studies, but just maybe talk to us practically, like whether it's eBev or others. What does it actually do?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So we have 4 revenue lines in our business that all use the same underlying technology. They all move towards our third part of our strategy, which is compounding. So our big ambition is that essentially we believe that there's going to be a new agentic economy created, just like the digital economy revolutionized the old bricks and mortar stores, right? And so that economy looks differently. So businesses that operate in the agentic economy looks different than the business that you and I run today. And so how do we get to that grand ambition of having all businesses in this agentic graph that we're creating? Well, that starts by choosing the right businesses that have the highest probability of connecting and being successful as we transition from digital commerce to agentic commerce. And so our beta program is just that. So we go out and actively select businesses in different sectors with different criteria to get a wide range of businesses for our agentic graph. So in Australia, as an example, if you think about the sectors that operate, you have accounting, you have finance, you have manufacturing, you have marketing, you have sales, right? We look for beta customers in each one of those sectors so that we can really continue to refine our workflows. So in PR, as an example with NWR, you have particular workflows that you do, right? And they may be slightly different than the standard ones that we've created in our Decidr platform. So it really helps us kind of get to the last mile of workflows. But also it allows us to, when we turn these agentic businesses on in our beta program, they start to send proposals out to customers, right? They're alive. They start to do things. And so that actually creates connectivity and new leads that go into our business in the future. And so we have, we run different cohorts of beta customers that are coming through the pipeline. The quantum in each cohort changes based on a number of different factors. But I think we're into our 3rd cohort now of customers, and the first cohort is now shipping into live products. And so we had a case study maybe a few weeks ago with a merchandising company, right? So called Mercha, that it makes a swag for every business, and the notepads that we have 5 million of from the conferences and things like that. It's a really cool company because arguably it could supply every business in this country, which is also a critical criteria for our beta program, and a drop ship company. So it uses international suppliers to manufacture those things and to ship them through. And so we've been working with them to what I would say is revolutionize their sales process in their business. So sales or proposal generation is just a workflow, right? I think what everyone also forgets is even SaaS businesses, they just give us workflows, right? A CRM system like Salesforce is workflows for creating opportunities and proposals. So a business can be broken down into those, those tasks or those steps in a particular order. And so what we do with Mercha is we've gone from a very human exercise of creating proposals for NWR, for new vests or books or whatever, pens or whatever it is. And we've put them into our system, which is like a company brain. So it takes all of their purchasing data, all of their customer data, all of their vendor data, all the transaction data. It brings it all together for a single source record, which just by itself is really, really valuable. I mean, many businesses wouldn't know that, to be completely honest. And there's a number of, I think, real surprises that came to the Mercha leadership. They didn't know how many, for example, they knew how many intuitive vendors that they have, but they didn't align those to which products were versus which ones were sold the most often. And so one of the insights that came out of that particular exercise was a vendor that they had, which they had put into tier 3, was actually connected to, more than 50% of their revenues. So they need to treat that vendor probably a little bit differently than they had been. So essentially we're able to, take a process that took hours to create an individual proposal. And because they have 35,000 different SKUs in their business. And so you can imagine if you're a human, you got to say, oh, this is a construction company. Which products should I select? What is the quantity of products? How much should I discount? What is the shipping? All those different things. And by putting into our Decidr OS platform, it does all those things for the human. And so the human actually goes to the last mile and says, okay, well, this is a construction company. Our system would identify that they have some conferences that they're going to. So you have to buy some additional swag that they're going to give out, as well as a number of employees. And their employee groups are split between corporate and builders. And so the proposal is smart enough to say, get some high-vis vests, right? But also get some fancy, Patagonia vests for corporate, and buy 5,000, branded pens and notebooks, because they've got 4 conferences that they're going to over the next 12 months. And so that process from Merch's standpoint, and we had Ben, the CEO, come and do a case study with us, is, that's saving hundreds of dollars per proposal. But more importantly, it's gone from their capped ability to send 2 to 3 proposals out a day to effectively unlimited. And by putting their thousands of leads into our system, we're able to identify tens of thousands of new prospects for them, of which now there is a marginal cost to now create that proposal to send out to their customers.
It all stacks on each other, basically.
Yeah. And that's the process of the beta program, right? There's a saying, like, how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time. So how do you transform a business into an AI company? One task at a time, or one workflow at a time. And that's our beta program, realistically. But after you go through N number of customers, you have all the workflows which are productized and generalized and customized, and then you can go out to the rest of the market.
And SugarWorks, how does that fit in?
Yeah, so SugarWorks, great. It's a really interesting company. I think this concept, you'll hear different words like a company brain, tacit knowledge. We call it knowledge security. But SugarWork is a business that captures how you actually do things in your business. So people who are listening into this podcast, we've all read a manual when we first arrive, right? This is how you use SAP, or this is how you use our CRM system. And in good companies, it's well documented. In most companies, it's not.
Not here.
It's not at all. But that's really not the way to use those systems, right? There's about 80% of knowledge in a business is actually in people's heads, right? It's jumping between systems. It's your historical experience, so you've been in PR for many years, right? And all that hidden stuff, right? The heuristics that you have, it's in your head. And with SugarWork, we're able to now extract that out into actually workflow documentation of how work actually gets done. And so SugarWork does 2 things for businesses. One is for enterprises, it helps them protect their knowledge, because I would say for Fortune 5,000 companies, most of their employees would be using OpenAI or Anthropic. And what's happening is when they're putting prompts into those systems, OpenAI and Anthropic are extracting out how they do things. And that's being evidenced, right, with the Anthropic literally going across and like eating industries, right? The latest one was they've eaten the marketing and graphic design industries, right? And so businesses need to protect how they do the things that they do. And so SugarWork actually helps a business like capture that. And our recent placement, part of that capital, that CapEx that we're putting in, is actually to help businesses now create their own large language models. So you use your own company brain.
It's not going out into the ether and getting used and
getting
abused.
Taken by somebody else to rent it back to you at a higher increasing cost. So if you create your own large language model, it's between 20 and 30 times cheaper than Anthropic, but it's also yours, and it's always on. And so as your business,
that's a bit safer.
So we call it knowledge security. But how does SugarWork fit into the Decidr strategy? Well, not only does that help a business kind of enter the AI transformation safely, and it's a really valuable asset, but think about that tacit knowledge as like a configuration system for your own agentic business. And so we really see SugarWork as of critical importance.
It's almost like an enabler, right?
Yeah, it does the settings. It does the settings for your AI company, right, in the future. And it does the settings by using language. You do things like have conversations with an AI or with other people. All those Fireflies transcripts or the Teams transcripts, that's tacit knowledge, right? How you make decisions. And then that goes into your, essentially your SugarWork model or your company large language model, and then you just use that. And so the future is not just using one model, although Anthropic and OpenAI would like that, The future is actually
best of breed.
Yeah, you just use the model for the right task.
Yep.
So you don't need to use Anthropic, which is like a Ferrari, to do one task of getting the first name. Just use your own model, right, that you've trained, which is 20 to 30 times cheaper, and it's not, that data is not going out.
And that probably sort of answers my question in terms of sugar work. I've got a lot of things in my brain, which is a bit scary for some. But in terms of actually extrapolating that stuff out, how does that practically happen? Like, is it a consulting? Is it services? Is it technology?
Yep.
Or is it, as you say, with Fireflies, with your team's recordings and whatnot, all I talk about and that sort of dumps it out? How does it actually work?
Yeah, it's a software platform. So there's a new saying like services as software. And so I'd say SugarWork is like 90% software, 10% services. So what we do is the SugarWork team will go into a large enterprise. They're usually looking at a particular business unit or workflow that they start out with. And the SugarWork team helps them set up the SugarWork configuration. So SSO, putting it in their own environment, right? Really getting up so it's safe and secure. And then after that, using AI interviewers as well as kind of facilitated guides that SugarWork has created that come from the best in class research from Harvard and those types of things to extract tacit knowledge. You go through this, I would say, like relatively lightweight exercise to be able to capture like your experience. And that kind of, think of that as the archaeological dig, the first dig, right, into NWR in this case. And then after that, you have what we call tacit knowledge telemetry, which means the Fireflies, so that's always on. And so you don't need to think about that anymore. It just gets turned on in the background. And of course, you as a business, you have control over what and stuff. So you don't go into like the creep zone. Well, mainly it's a creep zone. And
are you calling me a creep?
No, never. But there are, like Mark Zuckerberg said that he was like logging every keystroke, which is
that's right.
Like there's better ways to communicate what you're going to use that data for. But so SugarWork it's not only like highly secure and compliant, it also passes the creep, it passes the creep zone test. But that's the always on telemetry. So that means that the stuff that's happening, even the questions that you're asking today, right? That would go into the NWR large language model, and that helps improve the model. So if one of your direct reports or your teammates wants to go like, what questions should I ask? Guess where they go? Right? They go into the NWR LLM, and it will give them things that are based on how you would ask questions.
And when you talk about the agentic graph, what's the moat of Decidr, as you say it?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple moats that we have. The first kind of layer of the moat is part of our go-to-market strategy with our partners. So we help build AI agents or AI apps for large SaaS companies, and so those SaaS companies then distribute that app to their customers. So we have kind of our embeddedness. So embeddedness is the thematic of our moats. So that's kind of like moat number one that goes through. So once we build this for our partner customers, and of which we have more than 15 signed and 5 commercialized, then they start selling into their customers. So that's kind of moat number one, that we become an intrinsic workflow in their software. Moat number two is in our agentic graph. And if you think about any infrastructure company, the moat is created by embeddedness, right? So if you're a network company, you want to lay down as much fiber as you can, as quickly as you can. If you're a telecom company, you want to have as many 5G towers that you can, right, as quickly as you can. And so for us, when it comes to our agentic graph, we want to, what we call, pre-board as many companies onto our graph as possible. And so the best analogy I can give is Google. So when Google first started, it had to index all the websites to be able to give good search results. So Google created a search graph so that when you search for a keyword, you found the best ranking website based on, today they have about 160 parameters that goes into what is best. But it was just the best website for your keyword search. So that's a search graph. But Google, you can't just index like a couple of websites. That doesn't really work. You have to do the whole thing. And so that's our agentic graph moat, is to, just like 5G towers or just like fiber, we want to go out and essentially pre-board every registered business in a country onto our graph. And what our system does is it goes out and it grabs public information about that company and it builds their agentic business for them. And that agentic business has AI in it, and it's thinking, and it starts to look and build proposals and look for vendors and all those different things. And one day, perhaps from one of our beta customers like Mercha, NWR, you'd get a proposal for some spiffy Montclair vests, right, that you want to splurge on, and they're cheaper than you thought. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. I wouldn't normally do that. And you click on that proposal, which may have come to you on Instagram or by email or another digital media, which our system would think about and send the best way, the best pathway.
Relevant, yeah.
Yeah. And you'll go, okay, cool. Maybe I'll take a look. That would then take you to the NWR agentic business to kind of transact, because Mercha would want to transact through their agentic business. And so you turn on yours, you put in your email address, right? You run the transaction, and while you're in there, maybe we'll give you $50 to look at some other potential prospects to send up NWR proposal to. And that's how, and that's how it
starts
goes.
To spray around.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, the search graph or the social graph. So the more friends that are in there, they bring the more friends in, and it has positive churn, which is also a great thing. And like social media and like email, right? They have very fast kind of expansion cycles that come in, J-curve cycles that come in.
The last quarterly, the exit run rate from Decidr was 8 million, just tick over 8 million, which had doubled. Where does it sort of go? Obviously, we don't provide forecasts and whatnot, but what's the sort of valuation driver here? Is it revenue? Is it partnership expanding? Is it the sort of intangible of the moat as we've talked about it, or how do you sort of look at that?
So we've had 5 quarters of growth since we started commercializing, kind of averaging around at like 1.5 to 2.0 growth per quarter, which we're pretty proud of. And but that growth is largely, so that 8 million is only Australia. That's one thing to think about. And about more than 50% of that is our partnership channel, which is driving that growth, with the remainder being our beta customers and some of our kind of our one key larger customer, the AIM, which is the Australian Institute of Management. And so what we'll see in the coming quarters is that we've got compounding opportunity in a couple different areas. So compounding opportunity number one is we now have Singapore, or APJ, and the US with our acquisition of SugarWork. So that's number one. Number two is we have SugarWork, which is I was really proud of the team. We celebrated our first Australian sale of a very large aged care company. So very big, 3,000 employees. And that was only 45 days after we settled with the transaction. And that was in January. So big shout out to John O'Grady who did that. But that's a really good positive signal that a newly trained person can go to another country and sell SugarWork, which is really great. And then compounding number three is actually our partners themselves. And so we've commercialized 5 out of the 15 that we've signed. And so there's more to come in terms of the net new partners that we turn on, but also the existing partners, they will continue to compound. And when we think about a partner, it'll take between 12 and 18 months to kind of hit the net penetration rate of that particular partner. And it really varies, right? So we have Career One, which is a classifieds business. We have eBev, which is in the hospitality industry. So there's different mechanics, but broadly speaking, that's what my experience tells me in terms of like how long it will take. So if you kind of take those orientation points and you kind of project forward, I think we've got a pretty bright future in terms of our continued growth for the business that that ultimately is building towards that the ultimate compounding, which is the agentic graph. So everything we talked about today, strategically, every activity, every piece of tech always leads to our graph business.
You could literally talk for 5 hours on this stuff, which is quite scary. And I know that we're already running over time, so we've got a minute or so left. Okay. In terms of everything goes right, which never happens, but it can go really right. Let's be positive. Yep. How does Decidr look in 2 years' time?
Yeah, it's a sunny day in Melbourne, so let's put
exactly.
our positive pants on.
It's bright and sunny.
Yeah, exactly. What does Decidr look like in 2 years' time? 2 years' time, I think what I'll start with is the world will look a lot different. That AI will be likely very deeply embedded in many workflows, like not all, but many workflows in enterprise businesses. And the way that we actually run businesses today will look a lot different. So, probably less meetings, about less dashboards and those types of things. And so what will Decidr look like? Well, I think if we're successful, nobody will see Decidr. Decidr will sit underneath everything.
Secret sauce.
Yeah, but it'll be that kind of like your router back in,
exactly.
Underneath your stairs, that there's a router in every home in Australia, right? And Cisco is very happy for that and very successful for that. And so Decidr will be, we really think a really large layer over, the magic number is 10% in any country. When you hit 10% penetration, that's when it's going to really rock and roll. And so maybe we won't be at 10% there, but if you're talking, 2%, 3% of the U.S. businesses, that's 32 million businesses. So Salesforce only has 150,000 customers, to put that into perspective.
Gosh, that's scary.
And so that's we're building towards us being really a ubiquitous technology that really helps people make use of this pretty remarkable artificial intelligence.
I always find every time I talk to you, I learn a hell of a lot. So hopefully those who've listened in agree with that. Look forward to getting you back on. We won't wait 18 months next time because the world moves so quickly. But well done for what you've built so far, and good luck for the future.
Thank you. We'll wear tuxedos next time.
Yeah, exactly. Let's bring it up a notch. Thanks, DCB.
Thank you.